Men are visual beings, and women, y'all more emotional. We hear what you're saying when you're talking to us. We hear it, but we only hear what we want to hear.
I think one of the biggest things is that we're a person that wants to fix things, a person that feels we have control, a person that feels that we know it all. And we tend not to listen to anyone else, and we're straightforward, tunnel vision in anything that we do.
I decided to make this documentary because I hear so many people talking to the women about relationships, and no one ever talks to the men. I wanted to change the narrative. So I wanted to create a platform where men can share their relationship stories.
A man is everything that a woman is not. And so I think the mistake, especially in today's society, is that we're looking for a man to be more so to be able to understand you. However, in order for him to be able to understand you, he has to be you, because he's not a woman. Now, we can make efforts to understand, and that's where being more well-rounded as a man comes in, making efforts to understand. But I am everything that you are not, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for everything that I am not.
In this documentary, I asked very specific questions of the men. And there are questions that I myself have had in relationships, and there are questions that I hear other women talk about all the time. I'm very passionate about helping other people love life.
Be honest with yourself and be honest with me. I think it may be a bit unfair to expect the other person to be as direct right off the bat. And if that's the case, as it often is, be willing to take a little bit of time, to truly get to know each other.
Not every man is the same. You can't be botched into a group of men when every man has a different background, every man has a different way of thinking, every man has a different philosophy, every man has a different God almost.
In this documentary, I'm trying to help women understand men. And that just plays into who I am at my core, is somebody who wants to help everybody else get to the best version of themselves.
In relationships, the most important thing in relationships is communication. You have to know, you have to listen to one another to understand one another, because whatever, like say if you're getting into a relationship and you don't know what this person has been through, and then vice versa, that person. So understanding where they both are coming from, it takes a little bit of time, but just trying to listen and understanding what they're saying and not being afraid to express yourself when you say it. What people are looking for is so different, especially with social media out here. Everything is in your face. Everything's so fast. So now you're looking at people who's trying to get into this dating thing, and nobody knows how to court anyone anymore. You know what I'm saying? Because especially with women now just putting all their business on social media, so it's like you're not surprised anymore. It's not, it's already unwrapped. The portrayal of everything now is just so superficial. It's not real, and what you're seeing now is not what you're getting. Because now you can go on a date with someone where you think they're this type of person, but then find out as time go on, that ain't who you thought it was. Yeah, it's always that. Because everybody had a representative. Anytime you talk with somebody, the first thing they give you somebody that's not them. Right. For me being married, and I've been married 14 years now, thank you, and I'm still learning. Every day I'm learning, because every day is different. It's not the same, it's not like yesterday, or the day before. Things change, because of attitudes or how people feeling. Because one thing about it is, when I wake up in the morning, my wife wake up in the morning, sometimes I have to take initiative to see where she's at, because I'm the man. And I think that however she's going and how she's feeling, I want to go with her with it, because I don't want to go against it, because then I feel that sometimes it'll be a problem. And then you don't want those. And to avoid them, and I say this all the time to men, is you're never gonna win an argument with a woman. Don't try to win it. And there's no award ceremonies for us if we do win. It ain't like you gonna come down and they be like, the winner of the argument of 2018, and they give you a trophy. It's not, So you just gotta go with one another, knowing each other's differences and their wants and their needs and stuff like that. At one time, I ain't gonna lie, I'll tell the truth. I was a womanizer. I didn't really respect feelings much. I just went with how it was. When I woke up, and if I felt this way, that's how it was. If I was in a relationship with it was more so me. You know what I'm saying? I was selfish. At one time. I say, me being in my 40s now, from me being in my 20s, it was like freelancing. I was just on the go. I might date this person this week, date another person that week. I didn't care. I didn't care about the feeling part, because as long as I got what I wanted, I was good. If you ain't get what you wanted, that was your fault. That's how I looked at it. But now, being mature now and growing up and understanding, and especially being married, you learn a lot of stuff where now I know it's someone else who has feelings, and I have to cater to that. Men are visual beings, and women, y'all more emotional. And one thing with us is just, we hear what you're saying when you're talking to us. We hear it, but we only hear what we want to hear, that sounds good to us. If you're gonna get into a relationship, communicate, because when you both on the same page, y'all both can fly together.
I think one of the biggest things is that we're a person that wants to fix things, a person that feels we have control, a person that feels that we know it all. And we tend not to listen to anyone else, and we're straightforward, tunnel vision at anything that we do. So that's one of the biggest things. We're looking for that perfect person. And though the numbers are in our favor, that there are so many transit people coming here for government, 4 years, what have you, work in different administrations, we have a plethora of people to choose from. And that makes it a little difficult, because you'll see something that you like, and then you'll look to the left, you see something else you like. We're visual creatures, and we tend to run for that challenge or something different. So I definitely think it's a difficult thing for a man to find someone in the DC area. The communications is off in a major way. I think one of the reasons communications is off, we as a man have difficulty expressing ourselves. We're guarded. We're guarded from as a child. We're always told to be tough. We fall, we slip, we get up. We tend to rub it off. Don't cry, don't show emotion. So when we get older, we're taught by what we saw our parents in relationships, and then we have our friends through high school, that they all talk about that person or this person, it looks good to you, or that's who you should date, or that shouldn't be who you should date. And we have a tendency of falling into that mindset, again, tunnel vision, to where we're not sure what we want, but we're tough. So when we do meet someone, we're not able to communicate with the woman, because we only look at it from a man's perspective. We don't look at the fact that we need to talk to them more and let that guard down. We're taught that way back. If you look back, as an African American, we've heard of stories when we were slaves and how we were forced to be in a certain situation. You look at it now in job market and things like that, we're forced to be in a certain situation, and that mindset to work somewhere 20, 30, 40 years, it's tough. So we always have our guard up. So when we do meet someone, we have our guard up. So it's automatically the defense. I have what I have, it's mine. I'm not gonna let anybody else get close to it, and you have to prove to me that you're that perfect person. Again, we're visual. You can have the, quote, perfect person. Career-wise, down to earth, you're able to communicate with and be who you are. And after a long day of work, you can come home and cry on his shoulder, and they don't make you feel less of a man because you went through a difficult day. I think they try to change a man for who he is. I think they go into it, they see the persona of a man, whether he graduated from college, he has a good career, but they want him to dress a certain way. They want him to act a certain way. And I think they go about it in such a way that they're trying to tell a man to be a man. And that's very difficult for a woman to do. Even if you're single moms, they can teach a kid the respect and can teach them all the etiquette in the world, but they can never teach them to be a man. And I think women have a tendency of approaching a man that way and trying to show him or tell him how they think a man should be. And they might have a very good example from their dad, but you're not their dad, and you're going to be who you are. And I think that's a problem. And then also just to be able to tone in their voice. Go back to that again, because if you high pitch or angry, and in a lot of different cultures, that anger is coming out differently. So it's a struggle as an African-American man. If you're dating someone who's African-American, they have a lot of struggles they're dealing with, you have a lot of struggles you're dealing with, and they feel like, quote, society is on their back. And that's something we deal with on an everyday basis. So they're automatically going to respond to that in such a way that the guard is up again and defensive, taking away the ability for me to feel that I'm still an individual. I'm still able to go out and go fishing if I want to without someone telling me how long you're going to be there or time me how long I'm going to be there and things like that. So I think a lot of women tendency to put these triggers on guys to turn around and say, hey, you're going out with your guys, I expect you to be home at 6. That expectation is tough because there's so many different things that happen, whether it be traffic, whether it be hanging out and have a great time with your friends, and you don't get to do it that often, but then they turn around and try to come off that way. And that set the guy off, and then he automatically, you're arguing, you're not communicating, and things like that. So I think a lot of times women tend to almost poke the bear, for a lack of a better word. I think the biggest thing is you have to be real with yourself and what you really want. There is no perfection, so you're gonna find someone that you can grow old with. They may look 100% perfect 10, and in 10, 15 years, their life could get altered, whether it be from a car accident, whether it be just from life and their aging. They're not going to be that same person, and you have to evolve with that person. When you and I first meet, we might turn around and love to go skiing. 5 years from now, we may be into snowboarding. So you have to evolve together. So I think what has to happen is when you meet someone, you really have to take the sense and say to myself, okay, this is who I met. The representative that they're giving me is this. How much of that I can tolerate or not tolerate? How much of that can I evolve with? And if that person's not willing to change who they are over a period of time and want to maintain, it's always going to be a problem. And I think a second nugget is the biggest thing is that be real with yourself. At the end of the day, none of this is perfect. So you're going to look to God first and then turn around. And when you turn to God, you're looking to be blessed with a queen and to be put God first. And a lot of people that you meet, they want to be number one right off the break. And they can't be number one because it's God first. And if you're dating them, they can't be number one even then because they're not your wife. So you still have family. You may have kids from a previous relationship. So you have to implement those things together and try to build it together. And communication is a big part of that. So I think that if you don't approach a person in the sense that you're number one, that they want to be on a certain level with you, they have to build to that level, but they'll never be number one over God.
We're alike in a lot of ways. We want a lot of the same things. Sometimes men don't always say what we want, just like women don't always say what they want, but we're quick to point out when we don't get what we want. Lo and behold, none of us are mind readers, so we catch each other, sometimes not in a positive light. But when it happens, and it does happen, it's a beautiful thing. It can be a disconnect when one of us, again, doesn't say or show what exactly it is that we want. For example, I may show you that I need and want your love and respect. You may do that in the same way to me, but I may not hear or pick up in which ways that you may want that love and respect. I'll just do it in a way that's come naturally for me, and yes, ways that I may have done it in previous relationships. Sometimes that may work for you, sometimes it doesn't. But again, you may not tell me it doesn't work, at least not directly, but I make it shown, and when that happens, that's when problems occur. Be honest with yourself and be honest with me. I think it may be a bit unfair to expect the other person to be as direct right off the bat. And if that's the case, as it often is, be willing to take a little bit of time, to truly get to know each other. And we talked a little bit about listening. That can be a real challenge on both sides. Oftentimes we'll hear what we think we want to hear, and the same thing goes with you all as well. But that may not always come out. And when I respond back and what I think I heard from you, you may respond in kind, but it may come across as criticism. That's how I may interpret it, when in fact, you're just responding, reciprocating what you thought you heard from me, but I wasn't as honest as I could have been with you. Everyone has their flaws. Everyone is healing from something, either a previous relationship, something from childhood, whatever the case may be. But willing to admit that, one, to yourself, and allowing yourself to be vulnerable, which I'll admit can be a challenge for me, is probably one of the biggest obstacles. Just being real with yourself and allowing yourself to be real with the other person. Sometimes when a man meets a woman who may hit all of his criteria, whatever they may be, if he even knows what they are, we can get a little scared, like, wow, she's smart, she's beautiful, she's outgoing, she's a great cook, she's all of these wonderful things. I hope I can measure up. And that's when we begin going into our heads and not necessarily our hearts. And next thing you know, we may find ourselves making the same mistakes that we would in a previous relationship, not realizing right then and there that what we say we want is right there in front of us. So treating her like we say we want to treat her, treating her like in our heart of hearts we know we want to treat her, becomes an issue. Because again, we're caught up in our heads. And sometimes with some men, we're scared. You mentioned before that we all have our love languages. For some, it's verbal. For others, it's nonverbal. For the vast majority, it's a combination, right? Communication for some men can be a challenge. Again, some of us may have a fear of really, truly being open and honest, being vulnerable, for fear that, that will come back to bite us. It will come up in an argument repeatedly. If she really found out, that this is, how I was, if she really found out that, I can be a little afraid when it comes to certain things, well, that's not something I'm going to share with her, right now. So once that communication channel gets blocked, then it becomes real easy for other things to be held back. Certainly not for the good, but it's easy to fall into a habit. And, again, we're whole, perfect, and complete as is, but we have some healing, that we need to do. And sometimes with some women, not all, it can be a challenge to just admit that, one, to themselves, and admit that and act like that in a relationship with her man. On the one hand, you may tell me that you're sharing something with me that I may need a little work on as a coach, to help me improve in that area. That's great. I appreciate that. Depending on what it is, that may not be something that's going to be fixed overnight. Constantly bringing that up, that may cause me to wonder, is that really you helping me, helping us, or are you in fact criticizing? Like there's something about me that you don't accept. There's something about me that, deep down you may not just like. And instead of telling me that, and hopefully we can deal with that, then it comes out as being overly critical. Be honest with yourself. Regardless of where you are religiously, but like Colin Kaepernick would, take a knee, talk to God. That wisdom that we all need is right there within us. Having a conversation with God, with Buddha, whatever it may be for you, I think is key. That's something that I didn't always do back in the day, but it's something that I've come to learn.
What women need to understand about men? Good question. First, I would say that not every man is the same. And a lot of publication has generalized men to perceive to be the same. One popular book is written by someone, I don't even want to give him the credit, but he generalizes men to be the same, or the way to treat a man is this way or that way. When you have all these publications and books and things of that nature that speak how to treat a man, people forget that every man is an individual. You can't be botched into a group of men when every man has a different background, every man has a different way of thinking, every man has a different philosophy, every man has a different God almost, you know what I mean? So one thing is every man is different. Another thing is that men need to heal, just like women need to heal. And the concept is not even thought of sometimes because men are taught to be macho. Men are taught to cover your wounds and keep on moving. But in that moving, they're not taught to take time to correct and fix and clean up your mess that you might have created or you've even recognized about yourself. And so I would say that recognize that most men need healing. And when you're speaking to a man, you need to recognize whether or not he's healed from his past or not. And he might not even know. He might need you to help him to recognize that. And they didn't realize just how much the words from childhood meant to a boy, and how from a boy to a man, he's pretty much been living off of unhealed scars from the mother, the father, and even other siblings, and they take that into adulthood and never get the proper counseling to correct that. So I would definitely say either one, recognize every man is different, and number two, recognize every man needs to heal. Communication is definitely, I think, one of the top ones. We've spoken about that earlier today. However, I think one thing that's missed is loneliness. A lot of people get in relationships because they are lonely. They don't want to be home alone. They don't want to have to deal with their children alone. They don't want to be going out to the movies by themselves. They want a companion. We were created to want companionship. We were created to desire that oneness with a mate. And when we don't have that, we'll seek for it. And the issue, I think, is that when you seek for all of these things because you're lonely, you're not completing who you are. And sometimes lack of love, lack of knowing who you are, hurts you in the long run because you're running into something that you're not really prepared for, you're not qualified for, and then that creates more drama. And you're scarred, you're not ready, and you bring that into a relationship, and it's called baggage. That baggage should have been handled and put in the closet a long time ago. It should have been handled before that person was approached. And so that dating world is filled with people that are unprepared for a relationship. When I was growing up, I always saw that the issues with most relationships are the men mess something up. That was my perception of how relationships failed. And so, yeah, I can't say that I didn't fail. I wasn't taught how to be open, honest, and transparent. Actually, I created another way of saying that, being hot. I didn't learn how to be hot, honest, open, and transparent. I had to learn that after the divorce, after making my mistakes that I've made in my marriage, so that would, I think, one thing that I would have told the younger me, how to be hot, how to be honest about just telling the truth of what happened. You don't always have to lie. Sometimes being truthful and honest helps you to not have to create more lies to cover up from the past.
I wish women would understand that men are a lot like them, but very different. The true nature of men, we're naturally wired different than women. And so what I would hope women would understand is that the same emotions and feelings that you expect from your female counterparts, your mother, your sister, your brother, your aunts and your friends, you should not expect that same thing from a man, at least a well-grounded man. Mm-hmm. It's going to be different. A man is everything that a woman is not.
Okay, that is so true.
Right. And so I think the mistake, especially in today's society, is that we're looking for a man to be more so to be able to understand you. However, in order for him to be able to understand you, he has to be you, because he's not a woman. Now, we can make efforts to understand, and that's where being more well-rounded as a man comes in, making efforts to understand. But I am everything that you are not, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for everything that I am not.
We complement each other.
Right. People in general have a hard time finding a good mate, but men have a hard time finding a good woman because most men haven't found themselves. So once you actually know who you are, it makes it easy for you to find what your mate is or who your mate is. You know, it's almost like you're a lug nut, but you don't really know that you have 6 sides or 8 sides, and you're going around trying to find something to match you. But when you know that you actually only have 4, that narrows it down, and then you find the right one. The biggest challenge people face in any relationship is knowing who you are. First of all, there's a quote I post about all the time. The biggest challenge in life is finding out who you are. The second biggest challenge is liking what you find.
Wow. I like that.
And then if you want to add the third biggest challenge is if you don't like what you find, actually correcting that. But what most people do is they never take the time to find out who they are. So they never really like what they actually do know. That's why they don't spend enough time by themselves, because when you're by yourself is when you have to actually face who you are. And so they always find different patches and different friends and different activities, and they're running here, there, and everywhere because they can't sit by themselves, because they don't like what they find whenever they sit by themselves. Muhammad Ali said, a man who thinks the same at 50 that he did at 30 or 20 has wasted 30 years of life.
Yes.
So the thing I would tell my younger self is to grow up, be more open, understand that you're not infallible. Take a look at what you're doing first. A lot of times in most relationships, we always want to point the finger at what somebody else is doing or what somebody else has done to me. Well, if you start off with what you're doing to allow that to happen, then, or to put yourself in that position, that usually solves a lot of the problems, at least from your end. And your end is the only end you can really worry about. You will never have a difficult time treating the person that you truly want right if you know who you are. Because once you know who you are, then you know what you want. Other than that, you just know what you think you want. Mm-hmm. And that's why you have a lot of these people who, like I always say, they have these resume marriages, because they have been told you want the guy that has this, or you want the girl that has this and this and this. So they go down a checklist of these things on a resume, where in all actuality, it doesn't jive with who you really are. And it doesn't even work in reality. You know, I love the power couple dream. You know,
everybody's trying to be Rock and Michelle.
Exactly. You know, but the power couple dream in most instances winds up being an arrangement. Most people are focused on what they want. They're not even really listening to you. You know, and so he's basically just doing what he wants to do. Because if he was really concerned about you, and if your needs came into the picture, he would take those things into consideration. For instance, if you meet someone, I think the first question or the first things you should be talking to someone about when you meet them is not what you want, is what they want. That's the easiest thing to find. If you're really concerned, if I meet you, I say, so Nicole, what are you looking for? Because I know what I have, and I know what I have to offer. And if you're looking for something that I don't have to offer, then I already know, versus me telling you what I want. Men communicate, but men communicate in a different way. And I think, once again, that goes back to my first answer to you when I said, we're not you. So we're not going to communicate how you want. I think the biggest problem with people in communication is that we want people to say things the way we want to hear it. It's like going to China and expecting somebody to explain something to you how you want to hear it. No, you have to adapt to their dialect. You have to adapt to their language. You have to adapt to how they pronounce words. You have to adapt to how they say stuff. And so, women, if you're asking me to say something to you, I'm going to say it to you the way I know how to say it. It's up to you to interpret what I'm saying and to learn who I am and what that means. I would say the biggest one is they're not listening because they're so busy trying to listen to it to how they want to hear it. Okay? And so a lot of what they say, communication is 85% nonverbal. Mm-hmm. So, and I think they've done a study before, I forget what the actual numbers are, but it's something like men say 2,000 words a day and women say 10,000. Mm-hmm. Okay? We say the same things, we just say it differently. Like I said, they're listening for what they want to hear and how they want to hear it. And if it's not coming across how they want to hear it, then they don't hear it. It's not that it wasn't said. It's not that it may not have been clearly communicated. Sometimes somebody might actually say the actual words, but we weren't really trying to hear that. You know, well, I know what he said, but I'm sure, he meant this. you know, when he quite clearly said, no, I do not want that. No, I do not like that, you know. And I've heard people who have gotten a very direct answer from somebody and say, you know, men, they don't know what they really want. You know.
That's funny.
So I think our society also has now tendered a certain amount of disrespect and disregard to the intelligence of men. You know, because you see it all the time in commercials. The bumbling idiot is always the guy who doesn't really know what he wants, you know, and it has to be explained to him and he has to be told what he wants, even though he has said, you know, emphatically, I don't want that, you know, but you don't really know what you want. Yeah. So what are my deal breakers? My deal breaker is, as I've gotten older now, is somebody who wants me to say things the way they want to hear it. And someone that I have to keep repeating the same thing, even though I say it clearly, that it cannot be misunderstood, but you are electing to hear it how you want. That's a deal breaker because that is a habit that's going to persist. And so it doesn't matter how good I'm being. It doesn't matter how trustworthy I'm being. You're filtering it through your filter, how you want to filter. You're hearing it, but then you're processing it the way and through the filters of your past relationships, through your past experiences, and you're not even taking the words I'm saying verbatim. And I always say to somebody, I will never get mad at you. I will never be upset at you if you take me word for word. But please do not misinterpret my words, especially since I speak very clearly and I enunciate my words. I look you in the eye. I don't mince my words. As a matter of fact, if something is coming across that it may be misinterpreted, I go back and say it in a very clear fashion so I'm not misunderstood. And to have someone then repeat what I say to them and say something totally different. This is what I heard you say. No, you did not hear me say that. That's what you thought I said because that's how you processed it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's a deal breaker for me. Find out who you are. You know, be comfortable with who you are. Learn to appreciate who you are. Learn to love who you are. And when you do that, then you'll be ready for that person because you will bring the best of you to the table. And when you're confident with the best of you, when you figured out that you are that four-sided nut, right? You won't waste your time with the 6 and the 8s and the 5s and the 3s. You're looking for a 4 and you'll recognize a 4 when you see it.
So I often get the question, who is Nicole Turner? Well, first and foremost, I'm a detox strategist. And when people hear detox, they think physical detox, but it's so much deeper than that. It's really about the physical, the mental and the emotional, not the physical. And so I help people get to the best part of themselves. And in order to get to the best part of who you are, you have to figure out those things that are preventing you from getting there. And that's what I do. I help people get to their best life. Live now, die later. Yes, that's a plug for my new book. That's what I help people do. So as an author of 4 books already, this is kind of like my 5th book, but it's a visual book. And I've had years of writing about relationships from a blog site to some of my books. I'm often on relationship shows, radio shows, and TV shows discussing relationships. But it's always been about my opinion. And I've had years of research studying relationships, not just so I can better write about them and tell a story, but so I can also be better in relationships. And so this documentary is just an extension of who I've always been. Like, relationships have always been the center of who I am. Well, I chose those particular questions to ask the guys because I hear so many women question those particular things, and I too in relationships have had those exact same questions. I wanted to know the answers because in knowing the answers, that helped me be a better version of me in relationships, and it also helps women. It gives them insight into what guys are thinking, because so many times we make assumptions, but we don't really know. This documentary is one of a kind because it gives men a platform to talk about relationships. You know how hard it is to get men to talk about relationships? Very difficult. So to have a group of men who want to sit in front of a camera and share with the world their opinions of relationships, oh man, that's what makes it different, because we're hearing from them, not what we think they're saying or how we think they're feeling, but they're actually telling us. People should support this documentary because there's a shift that's taking place in America today. And there are a lot of independent document film writers who are producing great things who before didn't have a platform to do that. And in this documentary, I'm touching on something that's not just about relationships. It's kind of like therapy for the guys who are sharing their stories. Because when we think about the overall mental and emotional health of men, some of the issues they have because they don't have a safe place to share how they feel about certain things, because let's be realistic. It wasn't manly for men to do that. And to have a documentary where the men are giving their perspectives on relationships is also kind of like them having an unveiling of some things within them as well. I want women to take away from this documentary that men have challenges too. And it's important that we learn how to communicate and interact and learn how to love men. Just like we want to be loved, they also want to be loved. Just like we want to be understood, they also want to be understood. So I want to break down those barriers that men and women, in particular Black men and women, have in relationships and find ways to connect with one another and better understand each other.